Back at school on February 14, Elizabeth fell in love with Joja. She sent him anonymous Valentine's cards and tried to get his attention every chance she got. However, Joja did not notice her. To him, she was just a junior high school student separated by 3 classes. Whenever he saw her, he pretended not to notice Elizabeth. Joja had a close friend at school named Anthony, who, on the other hand, always noticed Elizabeth. He would smile at her and try to talk to her, but she would get embarrassed and run away. As the years passed, both school and university became distant memories. One day in the park, a man approached Elizabeth. He seemed vaguely familiar, but his dark glasses and small beard made him hard to recognize. As Elizabeth was about to leave, the stranger stopped her. "Hello, Elizabeth," he smiled, taking off his glasses. Elizabeth recognized her first love, Joja. They got to talking and Joja apologized for his behavior at school, inviting her to a restaurant to make amends. They exchanged phone numbers and met up a few days later, chatting all evening like old friends. Love rekindled between them, and a year after a chance meeting in the park, they were married. Maria was expecting their first child. Time flies, sometimes imperceptibly. The 7th wedding anniversary came and their son went to 1st grade. Joja felt time slipping away. He was promoted at work, which also increased his workload and responsibilities. He often had to stay late at work to deal with the influx of cases. Meanwhile, Elizabeth, after working at the same firm for several years, decided to stay home after maternity leave. She would pick up their son from school and help him with his homework. Joja didn't mind this arrangement as he earned enough to support the family. When he returned home around 9 in the evening, he found the baby asleep and his wife waiting for him in the kitchen, visibly upset. Elizabeth silently placed a plate of food in front of him and tried to leave, but Joja stopped her. "Let go," Elizabeth said angrily. "No, I won't let go," he replied. Joja tried to kiss her cheek, but she pulled away from him, saying, "I don't want to talk to you. I'm sick of being alone when you come home late." "It's for a reason," Joja said, smiling guiltily. "I work hard for both of us, so we don't need anything." "You're not trying hard enough," Elizabeth objected sharply, breaking out of his embrace and leaving the kitchen. Joja dined alone, thoughts swarming in his head. He couldn't understand why Elizabeth felt this way about him and his work. He needed her support and understanding, but he knew it wouldn't be forever. When things settled down, he would spend less time at work. Elizabeth's reaction to the situation hurt him deeply. That night they slept in separate rooms for the first time. Joja came home one day and noticed a bottle of champagne in the refrigerator. He was surprised, as he had never known Elizabeth to drink alone. When he asked her about it, she said that an old friend who now lived in another city had come to visit, and they were celebrating. Joja believed her. One day Elizabeth presented him with an expensive bottle of cologne as a gift. Joja was deeply touched by this gesture, taking it as a sign that not all is not yet lost, and that she still loves him, despite the constant quarrels. In the spring, Elizabeth announced that she was pregnant. Joja was overjoyed. He had wanted a second child for a long time, but his wife was against it. Finally, it happened. The excited father called his best friend Anthony, with whom he went to school, to share the news. From Anthony's voice, Joja realized that the man was surprised by the message. They didn't have a long conversation. Anthony blamed it on his busy schedule and abruptly ended the conversation without saying goodbye. Joja assumed his friend was upset because he himself lacked strong connections and meaningful relationships. Summer passed quickly, and Elizabeth's belly had rounded noticeably, which was visible to the naked eye. She and Joja were already picking out baby clothes, planning renovations for the nursery, and happily discussing with their oldest son the joy of having a baby brother or sister. The bliss didn't last long, however. For the first time in a year, Joja managed to leave work on time. Overjoyed, he bought a cake and a bouquet of flowers for his beloved wife and hurried home. As he approached the driveway, he noticed Anthony's car parked outside the house. This was strange since his friend had not mentioned stopping by, and it was during Joja's working hours. Alarm bells rang in his head, drowning out all other thoughts, but Joja did his best to brush them away. He didn't want to jump to any premature conclusions. Once inside the building, he hesitated on the landing for a few moments, not wanting to enter his own home. His intuition told him he wouldn't like what he saw, but there was no turning back now. He opened the door and immediately heard quiet whispering and the movements of two people in the kitchen. Elizabeth was buttoning her dress, and Anthony was adjusting his belt. In that instant, everything became clear. Joja's gaze shifted from his friend to his wife, and back again. Anthony opened his mouth to speak, but Joja lunged at him and threw several punches before Elizabeth managed to pull him away, standing between the two men. "Enough," shouted Elizabeth. "I can't take this constant fighting anymore." "That's what I feel, in the way," her husband replied angrily. That evening of the same day, they exchanged hurtful words. Elizabeth admitted that the child she was carrying might not be Joja's. She laughed at him and asked how he could believe that she was pregnant by him when their intimacy only happened twice a month. Joja listened to her and realized that things would never be the same again. "Get out," he hissed. "I don't want you here." Without thinking, Elizabeth left the room to gather her things. Joja stared at Anthony, trying to come to terms with the fact that he'd been betrayed by two people he trusted. Anthony admitted that he'd had a crush on Elizabeth since high school, and when she'd started giving him signs of affection, he hadn't been able to resist, even though he knew it was wrong. After Anthony and Elizabeth left the apartment, slamming the door behind them, Joja was left alone, gripped by deep loneliness and pain. A week after the incident, he recovered a little and, after thinking it over carefully, proposed to his wife that they meet. He asked for a quick divorce and asked that their son live with him. Elizabeth had no problem agreeing to the divorce, but promised to think about and discuss custody of their son with him. Joja was left to hope that his bond with his son was strong enough that the boy would agree to live with him, and Elizabeth would move in with her new partner. As it turned out, that's exactly what happened. Joja would have liked not to communicate with his ex-wife at all, but because of his parental responsibilities, he had to maintain contact. After 3 years of joint life with Anthony, Elizabeth separated from him. It became known that Anthony was having an affair with his boss's young secretary, and Elizabeth found out about it by accident. She moved back in with her parents, where her mother did not miss the opportunity to criticize her daughter for being reckless and inconsiderate. Elizabeth was offended by her mother's harsh words, but deep down she knew she was right. If she had not cheated on her husband, her life would be different. She would not be trying to live on allowances and meager wages, but what's done is done, and there's no going back.